Welcome to Shardcast, the Brennan Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans bringing you all the news, discussion, and of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brennan's works, the Cosmere, and beyond. I'm Ian, and joining me is Shannon.
Hi, you know me as Gray.
Also joining me is Kadie.
Hello, I'm Aon Ene.
And this week we're discussing the Frugal Wizard's handbook, not guide, handbook to surviving medieval England, which came out 3 months ago to patrons, to backers of the Kickstarter. But turns out trying to schedule a podcast recording the weekend of a major world holiday is a bad idea. So
we tried. We really tried.
Yeah. So we're coming to it now. So do we want to start with some general spoiler-free impressions of the book?
Yeah, let's go in a quick round. I can start. I want to say I've read this a couple times now. I think I'm pretty positive on it. I'll say I'm not in love with it like the way I am some of the other books. But altogether, when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I thought that was pretty good. I liked it. I didn't think it was a waste of my time. I think I can see that this is not going to be to every Cosmere fan's taste. But also you get the sense that Brandon knew that and doesn't really mind either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This was my least favorite book that Brandon has ever written, I think. And that's not necessarily because there was nothing I liked in it, because there were some things that I liked in it. It just also had a lot that I really did not like. So there might be a little bit of me complaining on this episode.
They love the salt. We'll get salty.
Like we never complain about anything Brandon does. We never do that.
Never, not on this podcast.
So I'm generally pretty positive. Like going into this book, only knowing the title way back when, I had no idea of what to expect. And it was a delightful surprise for me of like figuring out, because with the Cosmere book, like you know kind of what you're going to get. Like the specifics like are always new and fun, but like there's some base level stuff that like you can know and expect going in. So with a non-Cosmere book, you're just thrown into the deep end. Like who knows what can happen? And I liked that. So like one of the things I really helped me get into it was like the setting, Anglo-Saxon England. I'm not a scholar of it, but I have read a fair number of books kind of set in that setting. So it's like having a frame of reference and like, okay, like what spin is Brandon bringing to this was exciting to explore.
Yeah. I think like, especially at the beginning, I was a little bit put off. Now getting a little bit into spoilers and specific things in the book. I thought it was just a little too silly in the first couple pages. It was like, it started off with like the joke, and then he's like a little dopey, like, what am I doing? Where am I? I'm rating things. And I was like, okay, this is a little bit lighter than I'm kind of into, but I'll read the book. I'll keep getting into it. But then it was Brandon, I felt, took the actual setting quite seriously once we were there, once we got into it and we met people there. And I was like, oh, okay. That sort of like was a relief. I was, you kind of do get the sense of, this is kind of a bleak world, but it's one that people do live in. And I really felt the sense of it being lived in. And I was really curious about this. Like, is this Brandon speaking from like he's researched this era before? And it turns out he had done actual, like this is a time period he was familiar with. Because what was really struck me is a lot of writers, when they go for sort of even vague medieval things, is like they like to go for a later period when there's like more technology. But there was a lot of like cultural elements, like and technology elements that I was really surprised. Like, this is very early. They don't have any metalworking. This is a point where armies are like a couple hundred people. Like, it's sort of like the idea of an army of thousands is shocking. So I was like, it's actually even the medieval era itself. I was like, oh, you don't really see people do this low tech setting. And I was like, it was very interesting. And he kept taking it very seriously. I really liked that element of it. So I sort of like, as soon as the setting started proving that he was taking it seriously, that was my buy-in. So when we met like Sefawynn and Ailston, and they started to we got over John's initial first impression. He thinks he's living in like a fake fantasy world for just a second until he gets it.
So my first impression on this book was, well, no, let's go back a bit. I was excited for this book. I like non-Cosmere books normally. I like going into them knowing that there's going to be something different. And I loved Tress. So I came out of Tress and I was like, okay, I'm excited for every other book now. I'm excited for Frugal Wizard, even though like most people are more excited for the Cosmere books. Yeah, I'm more excited for them, but so I was excited. And the previews, I had liked the previews. I'd liked the humor. I was mostly intrigued, but I wanted to see where it was going. So I read the book, and it's hard to remember what my first impression was of this book because my later impressions are so prominent in my mind, but I know that I was excited for it and I liked the start of it.
Until we got into it, but maybe we'll dive into that in a second.
I think I'm just going to leave it there, yeah.
So let's start getting into some spoilery territory. What were some of the things the both of you liked about the book?
Well, you too, of course, Ian.
Well, yeah. That's that goes without saying. Of course, I'm going to talk about what I liked.
Okay. I think my favorite parts were John and Sefawynn. I thought this was really good character work. And so I was like really intrigued. I think they were the core part of what made the book work for me, was it's a story of a relationship, but like it works for me in a way that Brandon doesn't really do that well in other books, in that this is like two people's character arcs clicking together in a way that it makes sense why they connect. Sometimes when Brandon writes relationships or even interest between two characters, like it's not always like kind of clear why. This felt like the work was put into the specific two characters. And so even just outside the idea of a relationship between the two, I thought their actual arcs were just perfect. They actually like went on the same journey, but each were uniquely and individually satisfying too. They weren't dependent on each other to finish their story. Oh God, I really like it. And I think my favorite part of this whole book is at the end. It's the climax of Sefawynn's arc. And we love Sefawynn. That moment, I'm so glad that moment is what got the art. It had to be. It's like, I think the emotional climax is sort of Sefawynn raging at the sky, just saying like these, essentially just being like, screw you, Woden. Like, you can't do this to us. We don't deserve it. She's mad, but it's also the catharsis of just the recognition, like, we don't deserve this. And it's like, so it's true righteous anger. And she calls down lightning and whites and destruction. And it's so satisfying. I got very emotional. I think that is like what made the book like, it's what made it like, I wasn't sure what I was going to land on it, but that moment I was like, I knew, okay, yeah, this is why I like this book, is that moment specifically. It was the great, it wasn't just a great moment. It was a great culmination of everything that Sefawynn had feared and felt. And it like, and she almost like had like the fear and anxieties and doubts and self-loathing of her people, like on her to release. I just thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, that is such a phenomenal scene, because it's the like, because up until that point, like she's like begging Woden for help, like, why have you forsaken us? And then it's just like, it reaches a point, it's like, why am I doing this? Screw you, like just GTFO, basically.
Talking about it, it's making me a little emotional. I'm just, oh, it was good.
And it's like, we see everything from John's perspective of like Logna basically being there, like, no, this is her moment. Stay back here. Let her do it. She's got this handled.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. It was just a really great moment.
The best moment, possibly. Yeah.
Is there anything specific you liked that you can talk about, Kadie, or want to talk about, rather?
Or want to talk about.
Yeah. So one thing I liked in this book was Logna, which in part was, I will fully admit it, because I have been on a Loki kick recently. In large part because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yes, I'm one of those people, and I'm so sorry. But I came into this book kind of in the middle of that, and I was like, ooh, Norse mythology. Yay. And spotted the character who, well, no, there was the story that they told where they mentioned Logna, and I was like, oh, okay, so that's the Loki character. And then, of course, you don't realize right away that Thok is Logna. Though I started to wonder, I can't remember at about what point in the book, but I mean, you wonder what's going on with her throughout, I think. And I had a few guesses throughout. I don't think I really guessed that she was Logna until it happened. I was kind of guessing that she was Thunor. However,
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't remember. So if I can't remember, I'm just going for their Romanized names. Sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, when she revealed herself, I was happy about that because I like characters like that. I like the trickstery kind of disguising and then advising the heroes, and all of that. And on a more specific note, I also liked that she was gender fluid at the end and did take a more masculine form, because I will take what scraps of non-binary human-ish representation Brandon will give me at this point.
Yeah, Thok/Logna, highlight of the book for me. I love like old lady characters that just don't care anymore and just do what they want. Like, they are the best characters whenever they show up. And then, yeah, I don't remember like when I picked up on the fact that she was Logna. Like, it might have been towards the end. I don't recall. But like the reveal that like she's his white that's been following him around. And also the fact that everybody else knew she was Logna the entire time. And that's why they were so weird to her. Yeah. And it was just John that didn't know. I'm like, that's funny. I like that.
I was willing to go along with John's perspective. I was like, okay, there's something weird here, but I'm sure it's fine.
But like she gives the explanation of like, oh yeah, like when an old lady like does weird things, everybody thinks she's a witch. I'm like, you are a smart old lady. Yes, work this reputation to your advantage.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, Ailstan. However we pronounce it. How can we go through the parts we liked without mentioning him? He ruled.
Yeah, like he was an interesting character. Like he's definitely the one I vibed with the least of like the main three, but he's just like a good character. Like
I felt like he
I just
surprised
want
me
him to succeed.
a lot because he didn't quite fit into the trope I thought he was going to. Like he turned out to be less grumpy than I thought he was going to be. He turned out to be a little bit less like hard and like toxic masculinity than I thought. He was like, you know, he was always like kind of he's always explaining to John like a little bit because John always has like a modern take, a modern filter through how he can't understand why Elston is acting this way. And I thought that was actually really well done in terms of being an audience proxy, because it felt like a little bit of a pushback against like the Hollywoodification of medieval whatever. So we have an expectation of like what they're supposed to act like. And it's like, actually, no, it's not rah, kill it, you know, no emotions, kill it. It's like he's not stoic, but he has a lot of emotions, like running very deep on lock. And it's sort of, I think he works well with Sefawynn to show that there is just a great grief underneath everything that this people experiences. The way that they think about things is just completely bound up in trauma. The way that they are dying and being killed. And I felt like Ailsten, he's so deeply emotional that in a way, like I think it throws John, and that helped me connect with Ailsten more too. Just to every time I'm like, oh, this is the kind of man Ailsten is. And he's like, I don't know. He got me.
Yeah. And like he really helps nail it down that like this is like a less real reality than John came from, but they're still human beings. And it's because I also think we run into this in like our world, thinking about people from the past as being simpler than we are.
Yes.
Like, but like, no, they were just like us. Just they didn't know as much about certain things.
That doesn't mean their problems were necessarily simpler. It doesn't mean that they thought all that different of things, like their thought processes.
And that's kind of why I also thought Ryan worked, to kind of go into him for a bit. Ryan is like the guy who has all the answers. He can't believe that there is actually something going on. He doesn't believe that the people of this world could be right about what they're seeing and understanding. He doesn't think they could possibly understand correctly what's going on here. And that's why I really liked Ryan specifically on this axis as opposed to John. John doesn't necessarily believe them, but he keeps his open mind, and you know he is willing to be convinced, and he keeps having these talks with Ailsten and Sefawynn, and he's like, oh, I thought you didn't understand, but they keep showing him that they do, and he's like, I was wrong constantly throughout this book. And in the moment we see Ryan, we see that he's never done that. He's never gone on that journey at all. So that's what felt very respectful to Ailsten and Sefawynn, is that they kind of like felt listened to by John. But the moment we see Ryan, you can tell in his mind, people like Ailsten and Sefawynn are so small and insignificant. And that's the kind of like the biggest hint that he is not the good guy here. They are just so small to him. Their thoughts are so meaningless to Ryan, and that was just uncomfortable.
They're NPCs to him.
Yeah, they are
fully fledged people.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, I was reminded a lot of Perfect State, one of Brennan's other non-Cosmere novellas. Okay. Everybody is just a brain in a jar, and like you have your own perfect world, like simulation for you. But like there's this thing between like the live born, which is the real person in the world, and then there's all of the machine born who are basically they're AI, but like they think they're humans. The difference in how they're treated. The people from John's reality think like, oh, we're more real than these people. Like, whatever happens here doesn't really matter. Like, Ryan is like, oh, what's important is like taking down Ulrich because of what he's trying to do in their home reality, not because of what he's trying to do here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something I liked was the black bear, which is this, he gets mentioned like a decent amount of times. Like, he was like the king of the Whalish. He had a war with the gods and like was responsible for Freog's death. This is King Arthur. That John apparently doesn't know enough to like make that connection, but I do. And like, hey, this is King Arthur. Why is King Arthur a villain in this world? I want to know more. Brandon, please write a sequel. Please.
Gotta go see what's going on in Wales. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
Like, apparently he's still alive. Like, he was bound like a landswipe. Like, what's going on? Like,
I would love to see villainous King Arthur.
Yeah.
But like, we gotta have another Welsh hero to keep things interesting and balance that out. That would be very cool. You just don't see that.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like this is one of those like niche parts of like the background world building Brandon came up with, but it's not part of the story, so it doesn't really get explored. And I'm like, but why?
You know what
why not?
We should read the King Arthur like books, the Knights of the Round Table stuff. I would like, let's go. I want to know more about this, because this is more than just like a reference. This is like, there is something to it. Like, it's a little bit even deeper than another Cosmere book. It's like, oh, this is our real world mythology, and I don't mind a twist. But I want to go see what the original was to see why that is so interesting, because I didn't know about this black bear thing. Never heard this aspect of it before.
Yeah, because it's funny because like there's a footnote in one of the Frugal Wizard sections, like mythological figures like Arthur and Robin Hood are not available. You must choose people who are documented in the historical record. But like, so it's interesting, like a version of Arthur is in this world that is also breaking down the laws of physics always work the same kind of trope. Because for those of you that don't know, Arthur means bear. It's kind of the connection I'm making here. He was also a Welsh hero. This is how I'm reaching this realization. Merlin also gets mentioned.
That one, I think, yeah, we caught.
Yeah, like Merlin. You mean Merthin? Yes, you are Walish. It's in, I don't know what chapter this is because there's not chapter numbers. It's just an arcane glyph that means nothing to me. Oh well. So we've talked a bit about what we liked. How about what we didn't like? And I'll throw that to Kadie first.
Okay, so getting into salty things. The main thing that I disliked in this book, and I think that kind of ended up overall ruining it, like ruining everything even retroactively for me, was John's character. When you don't like the main character, kinda hurts the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing mostly that I didn't like about his character was his struggles mentally and emotionally with himself, which there are characters who can do that kind of arc where I like it. But in this specific case, I did not like how Brandon wrote it, and it affected me on a personal level, which was a good part of why I didn't like it. It hit me a little harder than I would have liked it to hit me. I am going to give a content warning now for suicidal ideation and suicide attempts. We will put in a chapter in the video description so you can skip past this. And I'll like wave my hands or something if you want to just like mute it or something. But content warning for those things. I will be discussing them in the context of the book. So Brandon had John attempt suicide in this book approximately 2 times. There was at the very end at the dock where he tried a couple times to take his own life, and Logna called him out and was like, dude, stop. And I am so glad that she did that. Heck yes, Logna. But there was actually a time before that, which I suspect some people would not or may not be considering as suicide, but that I do personally myself. And I'm just going to go to the book, go up here and find a little excerpt. This is in chapter 36, when he's going for the portal machine, and he goes, my life had been worthless, but maybe my death could be worth something. And he basically makes a suicide run where he doesn't care if he dies here. He's just trying to get something done. And to me, even if you are attempting to sacrifice your life for the good of something, that is still an attempt to sacrifice your life. You are doing it knowing that you're gonna die, intending to take that as an okay consequence. That is sometimes more on the side of passive suicidality than it is an active attempt. But to me, that still qualifies as suicidality. Looking at his mindset throughout the book, leading up to this moment, and then, of course, after this moment, where he does not think that living is more important than destroying this portal, which you can make an argument that that's fair, that he's trying to save this entire world, and that is more important. But it still upsets me because he had this entire book going, I'm worthless, I've washed out of everything I've ever done, I'll never amount to anything, I am an utter failure, this is the only way I can be not a failure, this is the only way I can help. And the narrative in this time supports him. Later on, the other times by the dock, the narrative does not support him. I have my own problem with that, but we'll get to that in a second. I do not agree with the narrative in this. I think there are ways that you could have written John doing this sacrificial run without making it so that he is deciding, okay, maybe my death is the way that I can be worth something. Even if this is... I think that there are ways that this can be done better, and I know that Brandon can treat suicide better because he has spoilers for the Stormlight Archive books. I know that Brandon can do better with this because he has done it better in Rhythm of War. End of spoilers for the Stormlight books. That was all I wanted to just make that comparison. He can do better. That's what upsets me about that first attempt, which I would classify as a suicide attempt. By the docks, I'm very grateful that Logna calls him out there and is like, yo, you don't need to do this, stop. I am not grateful that in doing that, she and kind of the framing around how those attempts were handled, it's all very lighthearted. It is treated as, haha, John, you don't need to be doing this. Why are you trying? Don't kill yourself. Which is, I'm glad that there was a, hey, don't kill yourself. But I don't appreciate how it was handled. It wasn't a, oh my goodness, do not kill yourself. Are you okay? Do we need to talk about things? It was instead a, you don't need to do this to do what you're trying to accomplish. Come on, dude. Mm-hmm. Which made me kind of appreciate Logna stopping him and also mildly dislike her for how she stopped him and how she talked to him and treated him. Because on the one hand, I was definitely mentally yelling at him and salty at him and unhappy. But if I had actually been there, that's not... I would have tried to not talk to him that way in person. Mm-hmm. It's complicated. Suicide is complicated, and mental health is hard sometimes because different people need different things and different people do different things. But overall, I am just very disappointed in this book. And I was upset at John for having this character arc and then ending it with, guess I'll die, and only being talked out of it just lightheartedly at the end. I did not feel at the end that he was like fully safe, or that his character arc had gone in such a way where he had fully gotten over, not that you fully getting over something like that kind of self-loathing and self-esteem and feelings of worthlessness is something that takes a long time. And so I wouldn't have expected him to just be over it by the end of the book. But it would have felt better knowing that there was some kind of progress. It is good that he has Sefawynn as a tie and that he has kind of a purpose in things that he is good at now. Or like he's going around in the end and helping people, but it didn't feel like he had reached a point mentally where it felt that I was satisfied with his journey. I was just concerned and angry and hurt by him throughout the book, which on some level was because I was personally affected by it. I will say that there is that bias, but on the other hand, I just really did not like his arc throughout this book and how his character was handled in those ways. And I am going to say
thank you for sharing, Kadie.
Yeah.
It was awesome for getting a very difficult subject articulated in such a, I would say, gracious and intelligent way. Thank you. So I had a thought as you were explaining, or I had a couple of thoughts. One of the ones is like at the moment at the docks. And so this is more a question, like would you think this would have felt differently if the moment was kind of lighthearted and it was almost as if it felt maybe almost too easy, like, oh, if Logna hadn't had such a kind of neat way around it, like how would it actually have gone? How would that scene actually have gone if Logna didn't have like such a, oh duh, of course you can do this thing, and then it acts like it's resolved, but like the actual core character moment isn't? Like if she didn't have a solution and they worked through it a different way, would you still feel like that this is like John is a suicidal person?
If they had worked through it and kind of specifically acknowledged that they were finding a way so John didn't have to die because John did not want to die and felt that he had things to continue striving for, and that there was more to him than just being a worthless failure. And if they had kind of emphasized that, like, he did not, like, he wanted the world to not be collapsing or whatever. I don't remember, like, the specific details. He was harming the world and
unravel the world in some way.
He has too much substance.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the world unravels around him or something.
Yeah.
That if he had wanted that to not happen, of course.
Yeah.
But also had not been willing to kill himself to accomplish that. I think that would have helped me.
Yeah.
Or that would have been more satisfying, where instead it felt like he was willing to just drop of a hat off himself.
Yeah, because we never really get a moment where he says, I want to live, or I want to keep trying. We never, like, I can see why that would feel like an unresolved thread of, maybe not even thread, core trunk of the character.
Yeah.
It's like the symptom was treated, but not the underlying condition.
So like if it's definitely a very stable and even firm read of the character that he is suicidal. I can see why people wouldn't read him this way, but I think this is just like an incredibly solid read. Like this is a version of the character that does exist in the text, and I don't think there's enough to deny it, like based on it. Like I didn't read it that way. And I like, but it's the kind of thing as like, as soon as it said, I'm like, yeah, you know what, that seed is in there. Like, I didn't want to throw off your rhythm while you were talking about the first like passive suicidality moment. Because like, this is what he does is not exactly rare in thrillers or action movies or like any other genre. Because it's like sometimes there is like, oh no, there's a ticking time bomb, or there's like a very time sensitive threat, and I'm the only one who can do this, and they have to make a quick decision in the moment. So I wonder if the moment would feel different if John was thinking, I don't want to die, I do want to live, but I can't see another way out of it, so I'm gonna go into it and hope I make it out, but I have to do this. Like, would that have like totally removed that feeling?
Maybe not totally, but I think like, yeah, there were ways that you could have done this where it was I'm going to do this hard thing to save everyone else, but it matters that I am ending here, as opposed to, oh well, this is an acceptable. Like, there's a difference between going, I have weighed this, and it is more important that all of these people and this world live than it is for me to live.
Yeah.
And going, well, I'm an acceptable loss. One of those has a certain dismissiveness to your own life. A life, not to do a one-line Stormlight reference, but a life is priceless, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. There is a difference between saying this is something that has been considered and is something I choose, rather than simply choosing to do it because you don't weigh yourself as heavily.
Yeah, like it feels like maybe there's like a weight to the decision, or the weight to the emotion that's missing. So it feels like he's being very blasé, very dismissive is a good word. He's that feels to me even more like that's a narrative thing, like almost like I can see that to me. I'm like, oh yeah, that feels like more how John was written and not how John is. So it's sort of, even in my mind, I'm already separating it into like the character versus like the meta of how the character was written. So I'm like, because for me, I like John, and I'm like, I think a lot of people identify with feeling like a loser. Like, I think that is probably an element that like, even if like a lot of things didn't work in the book for some people, like the actual core premise of the character is pretty solid, because it's like he feels like an imposter the whole time. And it was like, and that's like the part I liked about what connected him with Sefawynn, and we'll get into that later. It was like just like the imposter, but it's if you can read the level of self-loathing that would lead to the thoughts of, I don't care if I die, like that's different than him assuming that he wants to live and that this is all just a blip. But the text, I think, doesn't make that explicit enough. There are just a few moments I would think of, like in other media. Like there's a very famous moment in One Piece. The character explicitly says, I want to live. And it's like, it's very powerful whenever a character says that. It's like, whenever the text can make it explicit that a character who's been going through this and has struggled with thoughts of wanting to end it, there is an emotional, depth, a weight, a heaviness to the decision to want to die and the decision to want to live again. I can totally see how this is missing from his arc.
Trying to see what I can add, but I don't think I can add anything to this because, well, Ene, you did a very good job of explaining your thoughts, and Shannon, you also did a very good job of explaining your thoughts. And because I also did not read John as suicidal, but it does make sense.
Yeah.
My biggest issue at the end with him trying to commit suicide is I didn't get how it would actually solve the problem.
Like, do you think?
Because his body would still be there.
Oh, the morbidity of his. Oh, I didn't even think about that.
I didn't think about that either.
His atoms from the more real reality are still there.
That's true.
So it's also,
to you, it doesn't even make sense on like his thinking level, even forgetting like the emotional weight issue. Gotcha.
Yeah. And getting into mechanics that probably don't matter, but also like every cell in your body is replaced over like 7 years. So it's like, will he eventually become native of this reality? Like,
oh, you are a realmatic.
Or is there like some sort of like intrinsic like soul that makes him have more substance? I don't know.
There would
probably
be a
never
funny
going to get this answer.
There would probably be a funny Frugal Wizard handbook page about that, being like, well, it's a mystery. Our scientists are working on figuring out, is it the soul or is it the body? And then it would be some horrible capitalist joke about what they're going to monetize that moral question. God.
We had to get weird realmatics in here somehow.
Somewhere. I hope this hasn't been too heavy.
I will say that is the end of our content warning on that topic. Everything now. Welcome back to anyone who may have dipped out.
Shannon, do you have something you didn't like about the book you want to talk about?
Oh, right. We're still here.
Yeah, we're still here.
Oh, wow. I was just like, that was great. That was good. That was a good conversation. I don't think there's anything I really strongly disliked. I have a few, not even nitpicks, but just a few things where it's not really my genre specifically. Like it was a little bit more alternate history than it actually is sci-fi fantasy in some ways. Nothing like, I wouldn't say these are even things I disliked, but these are things I'm a little bored by. So like the Ulrich and the mob plot, they were fine. They got John where we needed to go. I thought it was like a great reason for him to emotionally be where he was. But it also is just it doesn't really interest me. I'm just, the mob and 20 minutes in the future type. This is kind of just like inner city modern life stuff that I'm not really interested in my fiction. I just really prefer like being with like the trio in the old world kind of thing, dealing with the whites and John's going through and learning about this world. So on the whole, the people like Ryan and Jenn, again, the characters did what they needed to do, but they were also reminders of kind of being from a more boring plot because they're boring people. So it's the kind of thing, I think everything achieved what they were supposed to. They got the right emotion out of me and they did like what they were supposed to do. But it's sort of, there's nothing going to get around the fact that I think like Ryan being a cop and is kind of boring, and Jenn being like a really evil person who also is, pretended to be dead and like to do her own medieval history nonsense in like a really condescending way, and Ulrich and his mob thing and every mob character, actually, they were all just kind of fine. I don't really have huge dislikes. This isn't like a fact of like this ruined the book for me, but they are just aspects that I found didn't grab me.
That makes sense. I also didn't really have dislikes. It's like I disliked Ryan and Jenn, but you're supposed to dislike Ryan and Jenn.
Yeah.
I think the thing I dislike the most is this is probably never going to get a sequel.
Oh.
And I'm like,
it was a good sequel hook.
It has such a good sequel hook.
Yeah.
This plot arc is resolved, it wraps up very nicely, but there's enough interesting hooks in the world that I want more, please. Brandon, just add another book to your never-ending list of things you want to write, please. Please.
I want to get a little bit into Ryan and Jenn, just because they were such a almost out of place element. They were out of place on purpose, but I also can see like maybe that they were a little bit rushed. I think we could have gone into more of it, but they were pretty nasty people, and I kind of enjoyed the moment of realizing that how bad they were, because you get the hints of what kind of person Ryan is before the reveal later. Oh gosh, like I don't know if my experience was the same for others, but this goes back into understanding John's inferiority complex or feeling like a loser all the time. It's like when you're put into a relation against your cooler friend, there is like that moment where it's sort of like he feels like it's right and correct for Ryan to have yelled at him the way he did. And it was like, that was like one of those things where it's so painful. Like I had to sort of skim it because it's like, okay, I've been in this place. I maybe think other readers have been in this place. Not all of y'all, but some of us, of like feeling like when you're set, like being in the second place to someone, it feels like natural and like how it should be. And he's just, oh, finally I put it on the table, like now it's out there for everyone to see. We're finally being honest about it. I was so caught up in like knowing how that felt. I know exactly what's going on and why he did it and why he did it that way, that like I missed, like I've been so much in that position before that when the reveal for Ryan came, I looked back and that actually was almost helpful for me and just being like, oh, the fact that Ryan did that in the first place was a bad sign. And it was like, it was almost like I've been so much in John's place before. I didn't even realize how bad a sign that was for Ryan. So I don't know if that's relatable, but.
Yeah, both John provoking it and Ryan actually saying it all was, yeah.
I don't think I've closely read that scene ever. Like I think like in all my reads, both, and like I've skimmed it a couple more times than my two reads. I don't think I've ever gone to that scene and just been like the close read. I think I'm just skim and then just try. Let me wait till this is over. I can't handle it. It's so difficult.
And just like the little thing of like in the text of the book, like, he thinks of himself as John.
Yeah.
Always.
He
always introduces himself as John. And yet Ryan and like everyone else like still just calls him Johnny. Like even though he has never introduced himself like that. And it's like, yeah, the disrespect. It shows that it's so disrespectful. And it shows that Ryan doesn't pay attention to him.
Yeah.
Like he thinks like he knows John, but he really doesn't. Which is really sad for someone you're supposed to have been friends with all your life.
And it speaks to the kind of relationship that they've had their entire lives of Ryan is like the shining golden one, and John is used to putting himself to the side and like kind of like making excuses and like this is why it is the way it is. Of course, like like he comes up with reasons in his head why the way Ryan did it is right and correct, and the way if Ryan thinks that, then the way I did it was wrong. Because Ryan has succeeded. Ryan has succeeded in everything. So if he succeeded, he's right. And because John has spent a lot of time not necessarily getting what he wants in life, I think it was unfortunately so easy for him to think, I'm doing it wrong if I'm not doing it like Ryan. Mm-hmm.
And that just makes the scene where Sefawynn and Aelston like use his chosen name, Runian, like pointedly in defiance of Ryan trying to correct them, feels so good.
It does. And I feel like their immediate refusal to take Ryan's Ryan's taken point and they're not following his lead, that was also a moment of like, oh, hold on a second. My new friends are reacting to him in a way like, so that's also a sign. I was like, oh, we aren't supposed to agree with Ryan here. Actually, we're not supposed to think what he's doing is good here. My new friends like me and respect me more. And it was like, they've known him for days and they're already like, they think they treat John like a little bit like, oh, you're a silly goose, but like they like him, they respect him, they talk with him about their thoughts and feelings. And when John get things wrong, sometimes they're a little like, oh, come on, man. But they also explain things and like he changes his mind. You know, John does listen to them.
I think it gets into that John and Ryan have been friends since they've been children, but I don't think they actually like each other. I think it's a habit at this point. Like they've been friends for so long, so that must mean they are friends. They're not.
Yeah, I don't think Ryan likes John for sure. And I think John might be trying to like Ryan and telling himself he likes Ryan, but not like if he examined it, that would pretty quickly fall apart.
Yeah. I think Ryan also doesn't examine. I think he thinks he's fine with John. I think he's like, oh yeah, I like John. John likes me, or Johnny likes me is what he would say. He hasn't examined, like he feels very comfortable in like their relationship as a hierarchy. He's very comfortable with him knowing what to do and telling Johnny how to do things and telling Johnny what he needs to do in order to fix things. And he's very used to this dynamic. And I think he also is not examining it. He probably thinks everything is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think we can all agree, if you want to break up with someone, break up with them. Don't ghost them and let your grandmother, I don't remember which, tell him you're dead and just leave it at that. That's bad.
That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. It's not like at some point you have to go, oh, how did I get myself into this mess? I don't know how we got here. There's a pretty clear moment of how you got here.
Also, if you're cheating on somebody 2 weeks into a relationship, you should not be in that relationship.
Just break up with them.
Yeah.
I know. It's the thing. It's like what Jenn did was so dramatically terrible. I know it's not going to read as real to some people, but it's like, come on. Some people really are just like that. Let the moment be dramatic. This woman has no concept of proportion or what's appropriate. Just let her be terrible like that. It's like the moment she showed up and like admitted like, oh, my grandma told you we're dead, and I guess I just, whatever, I guess I would just let that go. Like I just startled into laughter. Like that was like, I couldn't believe.
Mm-hmm. Well, like also like Jenn. His parents, his sister knew she was alive. No one told him.
This is like why you're rooting for John to not leave this place. It's like, oh, you have nobody. Sefawynn and Aon Ene like you. They're your family now. You stay here. You stay here, son.
Yeah.
I know.
There's nothing for you in that reality. Just stay here. It's better. It has magic. It's automatically better.
Oh, God. I don't think I have much to say more on Jenn, but oh, boy. Yeah. Oh, boy.
I was just kind of like, haha, you're terrible. Hilariously terrible.
Hilariously terrible. Another quick thing. I did forget to say this in like the general likes, but I did want to bring up the thing with like Ahura Mazda. That was very interesting. When we first get into this scene where he meets Yazad and Yazad is explaining like he's a missionary and he's from like the region around the Middle East. And at first, like as a reader, I'm like, oh no, what's he going to do here? Like what weird alternate history thing? And I was like, the Christian missionaries and all of this. And then all of a sudden, Ahura Mazda. And I was like, it was almost like a moment of like relief. I was like, oh, he didn't go there. And then I was like, huh? So you go to Google. This is a real thing. This is Zoroastrianism. Ahura Mazda, not a car, or at least it wasn't originally a car. So very, very cool turnaround. I'm not gonna comment on the religious nature of what needle Brandon had to thread here, because I think there was a bit of a needle here in terms of talking about this openly, but I thought it was a really interesting history where it's like, actually Christianity never really did take off, and we're off here on a whole other reality branch.
They do get mentioned as existing.
They existed. Yeah.
Because when like John is talking to Yazad about like, oh, you're like a monotheistic religion, like he brings up Christianity, and like Yazad like recognizes it as like, oh yeah, like, oh, this is this other group. So it seems like in this world, like Zoroastrianism is like the monotheistic religion that spread through the world, or is starting to spread through the world, rather than Christianity, which is interesting.
Yeah, I was like, he did an interesting thing without stepping in it, or at least I think he didn't step in it. Fingers crossed, I hope. It was just one of those, oh, this is an actually interesting take on it. And I like that he just didn't like take a normal path of saying, oh, like the Christians are still here, but it just happened a different way. Like, I thought it was so different and unique to that he went for Zoroastrianism, but he also didn't make it a joke. Yazad is not a joke. He didn't, in my mind, from what I read and what I understand of the doctrine, Yazad is also not just basically just a Christian, but with a Zoroaster like title slapped over it. It felt very like actually different. I just was very impressed by this, and I loved the moment of like the bait and switch of what you think is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I liked it because it helps to show that medieval England was more
entirely
cosmopolitan, yeah. But like different parts of the world have been in contact with each other for a very long time. It's like, we don't think of like people of color being in England, but they were there.
They had boats. They had their trade routes, you know? It was great. We know who this guy is. We know where he's from. It's not startling or shocking to us that he's from such a distant land. He's just here visiting us for a time. Isn't it nice? Mm-hmm. He's a little weird, but we like him.
And like, I also liked him because he gave some context for like other parts of the world. Like in his homeland, like, we don't have whites. Our spirits of the air are far more dangerous, and only prayers keep them away. Once in a while, you find a less dangerous one. We think perhaps they are the remains of the gods that ruled the deserts before we received the light of Ahura Mazda. So it's interesting, like, whites, like, as an expression of the magic system of this world, like, aren't everywhere. They seem to be like a Northern Europe thing, like, which makes me interested in like other parts of the world, like Asia or like the Americas. What else is going there?
Very interesting world concept. Brandon would love another book. Yeah, I guess the last thing I really wanted to get into was talking about why I really like John and Sefawyn's arcs and combined arcs so much. So I mentioned this briefly in the portion in the middle where I thought that John and Sefawynn both feeling like imposters in their own unique way and circumstances, but that's the core of their issue that needs to be solved, like their core dilemma, their core pain, was really compelling. Although it was from John's perspective, I really enjoyed seeing Sefawynn transform from someone who looks like she has it all together. She is an expert in what she does, but she also has her her really big insecurity, her really big self-doubt. One of the things I'm always kind of on the lookout for and I'm really concerned by is when female characters are treated as experts, but they're kind of like almost distant from being human. Like they get to be good at things, but they don't get to have feelings or they don't get to have nuance or depth. But I really felt as we got to know Sefawynn, people who are insecure or have these kind of doubts or feel like imposters are pretty good at pretending because they don't want to be found out. Now, and this can even lead to further beliefs in their competence. The whole thing about imposter syndrome, you actually are competent and you know what you do and you just feel like you aren't. But seeing John and Sefawynn start actually having conversations about this and surprisingly emotional conversations about their feelings in this regard, I thought was one of the better setups for the development of a relationship that Brandon has done. I was really touched by it. I really liked how John is trying really hard to impress people all the time. He does a little it's a little bit more joking in the beginning of the book when he's like, the handbook is like, you're a super powerful wizard. Tell them you're a super powerful wizard. But John very clearly, it's gradual, but clearly and irrevocably is able to reveal to Sefawynn like the depth of like, oh, I am just a regular guy. I don't know what I'm doing. And because he is able to do fantastic things, they don't really believe that he is just a normal guy. And that comes at the end when he's sort of like proven that compared to his own people, he is, he's not unique. Like he doesn't have things that the others don't. His nanites are, are even inferior to what the others can do because he has this lock on it. And so it takes time for Sefawynn to believe him that they're even in the same boat. So it becomes John trying to impress her, John trying to be honest with her, and then John being able to prove that he was the average guy he said he was. He doesn't want the distance of being impressive to Sefawynn because Sefawynn doesn't want impressive. Because what's valuable to Sefawynn is that she's not alone because she feels very alone. And so that's kind of what I really liked. And then when we get to see Sefawynn and learn about her through John's eyes, it's a story of like her slowly and carefully trying to believe that there could be more, that they could have more as a people and as an individual. She feels like she doesn't deserve to have any of this, like the power to call whites, being a scop. Like she can't make the scop thing work in the way that she knows it's supposed to work. And so like her story is like she finally gets the self-belief and the confidence that I do deserve this. I do deserve more. I deserve this life. And it was really interesting. I thought how John and Sefawynn weren't necessarily, I don't like the whole, like they complete each other. I think that's always a garbage idea, but I do like how they mirrored each other. And it was almost like they gave each other the key to keep going. And I thought that was like in a way of like, not that now that I've met you, we're complete and we don't have to do anything. But now that we've met each other, we can lean on each other and I know how to keep going is sort of what I felt. And that's really why I liked it so much. You don't have to like John Sefawynn, but
I think you made me understand it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. To be honest, I could just listen to Shannon talk about characters to no end.
It's my favorite.
Mm-hmm. I liked they don't complete each other, but they give the key to keep on going.
Yes.
That was a good line. I'm just happy that like they're in a good spot at the end of the book. Like they're going around, like, she's doing her scop thing, like telling stories, recruiting more scops, and he's putting on puppet shows.
Puppet shows. It's just so. It's like, oh, here's a cool use of like the magical things I can do, magical to these people. And it was just like, that's perfect. I love that it's not anything to do with his past life. It's not about him being like, I have to be good at fighting. It's not I have to be good at protecting people. He's good at being silly and telling stories to people.
It kind of does go back to his old life because like he went to art school.
He did go to art school. Whoa.
So it's like, and that was before like he got into the fight. So like this is like, I think more to like his original like hope for himself of like being an artist before like that fell apart and then something else fell apart and it all just like led to him being a fighter.
And I do like how it's almost it like he leans into the whole like being a goof part of it. It's you know, being a scop, like she's the one who kind of gets like the big serious, I'm gonna like the teller of stories and here's the drama and I'm like here's the news, here's the more serious things. And I look the concept of him doing puppet shows is just like, I'm here to make people happier, because he like I think that was the kind of thing he really was kind of good at. He wanted to be a goof. He was telling jokes or trying to tell jokes, even though sometimes they didn't get what he was saying. It was like, that was the vibe. And I know there's a lot of ways to get a happy ending. And I felt like, I was like, oh, are we just like happy that there was a happy ending? Because that's nice. But I like the specific way that they were said to be happy. Yeah. Is like Sefawynn gets her validation and respect and that like she gets confirmed as being what she's told herself she is, you know, so great.
Yeah, because like they're getting their fulfillment, but it's not the other person giving them that fulfillment.
Yeah.
They helped each other to get there, but they didn't, like, them being in a relationship wasn't the fulfillment itself.
It's not the reason that they're happy now. I'm sure it is happy that they're together, but when they explain,
it's like icing on the cake.
It's icing. Yeah. For people who are into that kind of thing, it's extra joy that they have. So
another small thing I liked that I want to touch on is that like the concept of Clark's law, like any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. Like it's a concept that gets explored a lot in science fiction and fantasy, particularly by Brandon. But it is fun to see. It's like there's a bunch of like little things in how John's like augments and his things are touched on that I just really like, because it's the weapons that had the biometric locks, like the way he explains it is like, oh, the weapons know their owners. And that is such a high fantasy way of describing that. I love it.
Yeah, I like that they aren't thrown by the concepts. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand what you're saying. The gun knows who you are, sure.
Yeah.
What can you say to that? It's right. That's the right way to say it.
The whole eagle thing, like I was amused by, because like I picked up on like that being elf very early, just because I know some basic linguistics and like, yeah, this is the same word.
Yeah, you say it out loud, elf. Oh, got it. Like it. It's good.
The way they're describing it like does kind of match like the legends of elves like in our world. So it's like, yes, like this all makes sense. Like they're smart people. Like they're working with the information they have. I think we've talked a lot about the text of the book, a fair amount, given there's 3 of us and it's a non-Cosmere book. But that's not all this book has to offer. There's also cool art from Steve Argyle. What did people think of it?
I really, really likes the doodles. It's a stepping stair for me. I really likes the doodles. I likes the Frugal Wizard pages. I didn't dislike the full color pieces, but some of them I liked, and then some of them I felt like didn't. There was something almost uncanny valley about them to me. I'm not sure totally where it comes from, but there was something where I was like, this is giving me weird vibes. But I really liked the Sefawynn one.
Mhm.
That was killer.
It's the bookmark in the Frugal Wizard box. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a good choice.
They knew. Yeah, I do like the I feel like almost that the full color, like those are kind of a given in these secret projects. They seem to be like the highlight, but like they're all getting them. I really enjoyed the more silly stuff too. Like as much as like I don't necessarily enjoy like the silliness in the text, like I thought they were cute for what they were. Like the handbook is a little bit of a lighter satire, like in between the pages. So like thinking them as their own unique thing, like I was like, oh, this is kind of funny. Like they made me laugh, brought my mood up when I saw them. I actually got a couple giggles, like for real, out loud at them. So
this is where I confess that I did this in audiobook when they came out. So I missed the art. So, but like scrolling through it, like at some point, like I am gonna like have to physically read this to get experience of like the doodles in the margins, because it is very well done. Like I'm scrolling through it and like, yeah, like this is cool stuff.
I need to read the image descriptions myself, because I know I was like a little bit confused about what was going on sometimes in the little doodles. So I need to. There are image descriptions. If anyone doesn't know, those exist.
Oh, good to know.
Oh, and the chapter icons. Those were cool, if sometimes confusing about which chapter you were on.
Yes, it's like the illustrations. Like I love like the sun does an arc across over the course of the book. That's really cool. Like the different rune stones are really cool. The arcane glyph, that's just a bunch of lines equal to the chapter number. I'm like, not as useful as an actual chapter number, I will say.
Pretty.
Oh yeah, looks super cool. Have no concept of what chapter I'm on.
Yeah. Before the comments pointed out, you can see like up on the very top of the page where it goes Brandon Sanderson, Frugal Wizard's Guide, etc., or handbook. There is it'll tell you which chapter you're on, but it took me a while to realize that, I will admit.
Yeah, I can see that now. So I think we're kind of wrapping up there. So no Who's That Cosmere character this week, because we're not in the Cosmere. So doesn't make sense.
Such as it is.
But thank you for watching. You can find us on 17thshard.com for all the news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And you can support our Patreon for as little as $1. Just one. Our next episode is on Secret Project 3. A little more timely on that one. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.